In this lesson, we're going to solve rational equations. And before we do, we're going to talk about this thing called extraneous solutions. Extraneous solutions are answers that don't work. That's basically extra stuff we don't need, is what I call it. Answers that don't work. And we'll show you what that looks like as we go through our examples. So we get an answer and we think, oh, cool. Then we would realize, oh, no, that's not allowed to be an answer. It's one of the restricted values. So when we solve our rational equations, the best way to solve equations that have fractions in them is to multiply everything by a common denominator. Multiply each term by the least common denominator. That's going to eliminate all your fractions, and then you can breathe and just solve a regular equation. So if I look at this equation, what is my common denominator? Well, I think it's going to be x minus 2, x minus 5. That's going to be my common denominator. So if I multiply each term by x minus 2, x minus 5, in the first fraction, this x minus 2 and this x minus 2 cancel. And all I have to do is multiply x minus 5 times x plus 5. On the right-hand side, the x minus 5 cancels and leaves me with x plus 1 times x minus 2. Look, no more fractions. And now it's just a regular equation for us to solve. We're going to multiply this out. And if you notice, this was a difference of squares. If I multiply it, I get x squared plus 5x minus 5x minus 25. There we go. On the right-hand side, I get x squared minus 2x plus 1x minus 2. And now I can start solving. If I subtract x squared from both sides, look what happens. The x squareds cancel. Yay! Now, over on the right-hand side, I've got negative 2x plus x. I combine that to get negative x. And this minus 2, I'm going to add to both sides. And negative 25 plus 2 is negative 23. So if negative 23 equals negative x, we just divide by negative 1 and get x is 23. Now, when we get our answer, we always check for our restrictions. What are the numbers x is not allowed to equal? We go back to those denominators. X minus 2, x can't be 2, and x can't be 5. And that's okay because our answer was neither of those numbers. So x really is 23. Okay, let's solve another. If I look at this fraction, or these two fractions, I notice that my common denominator is going to be x minus 5x plus 2. So if I multiply by x minus 5x plus 2, and over here I'm going to multiply by x minus 5, x plus 2. On the left-hand side, the whole denominator cancels, and all I'm left with on the top is x plus 5. Now on the right-hand side, only the x minus 5 divides out, and I'm left with x plus 1, x plus 2. No more fractions, I can just solve. So on the right-hand side, I've got to do some multiplying. That would be x squared plus 2x plus x plus 2. And now let's get everything to one side because it's now a quadratic. Minus x on both sides, minus 5 on both sides. So now it says 0 equals x squared plus 2x minus 3. And now we've got to solve this quadratic. So we're going to factor. Are there factors of negative 3 that'll add up to positive 2? I think so. plus 3 minus 1. So my solutions are x equals -3 and x equals 1. Well, let's look at our restricted values real quick. Make sure we haven't used one of them. Go back to your original denominator. X can't be 5 and x can't be -2, which is okay because neither of our solutions are the restricted values. If they were, we would just cross it out and say, that didn't work. All right, let's keep going. On number 3, if I factor this denominator, I get x minus 4, x plus 2. So my common denominator is this. I'm going to multiply each term by x minus 4, x plus 2. So this one in the front, x minus 4, x plus 2. I multiplied by the same number on both sides of the equal sign, and that is allowed. On the first fraction, x minus 4, x plus 2, they all divide out, and I'm left with 2x plus 4. On the right-hand side, x minus 4 divides x minus 4, and I'm left with x plus 1, x plus 2. I feel like we've done this one before. We just multiplied that here. So I know when I multiply that out, I'm going to get x squared plus 3x plus 2, just like we did up here. So now I'm going to move everything to one side. Let's see what that looks like. Minus 2x minus 4. And I've got x squared plus x minus 2 equal to 0. So now I have to factor. Factors of -2 that add up to 1 would be plus 2 and -1. X plus 2, x minus 1. So my answers are -2 and positive 1. Now think about your restricted values, your original denominators. I can't be 4 and I can't be -2. Uh-oh. My answer was -2. So what that means is -2 is that is an extraneous solution. Extraneous. That's what we were talking about at the beginning. Something that looks like an answer, but it's not really. So my answer is just x equals 1 because x equals -2 was one of the restricted values. It is not a solution. So it's good for us to show that we got it, and then we recognized that it did not work. All right, 2 more. I'm going to factor my denominator, x squared minus 4x. It just has a GCF. So we're going to do x minus 4. And I think that covers all the denominators, x minus 4. So we multiply each term by the denominator. And this gets kind of cramped space-wise. So we multiply by the common denominator, and we multiply by the common denominator. Multiply every single term on both sides. That balances the equation out. So over here on the left, x and x minus 4 divide out completely, and I get 6. In the second fraction, just the x divides out, and I get 4x minus 16. And over on the right, the x minus 4 divides out, and I get 2x. Ta-da! No more fractions. So subtract 2x, and then 6 minus 16 is -10. So I solve it to get x equals -5. Check those restricted values. In the original denominator, x can't be 0 or 4. So x equals -5 is an okay answer. Let's go to number 5. Very similar to number 4, x squared minus 2x just has a GCF of x. Why don't we list our restricted values before we start canceling denominators? What are the values that x is not allowed to be? Well, it can't be 0, and it can't be 2. Once we get our solutions, we'll check and make sure that none of them are in that restricted value. So if this is my common denominator, I'm going to multiply my first fraction times x minus 2, my second fraction times x minus 2, and my last fraction times x minus 2. So in the first fraction, everything divides out, and I'm left with 10. In the second fraction, just the x divides out, and 1 times x minus 2 is just x minus 2. And in my last fraction, the x minus 2 divides out, leaves me with 3x. So I'm going to subtract x. 10 minus 2 is 8. So when I divide by 2, I get x equals 4. 4 is not one of the restricted values, so it is okay to have for an answer.